From the roots of the world tree I rise. Ash on my skin, fire in my eyes. Old blood remembers the ancestors' call. Through stone and through silence I walk through it all. The veil is thinning, the shadows awake. Earth starts to tremble, the mountains will shake. Rise, rise, ancient flame! We carry the song that has no name. Through storm and starlight, we are reborn. The circle is unbroken, the veil is torn. I drink from the river that flows under time. 9 worlds are whispering inside of my mind. The wolf is howling, the raven takes flight. I become the bridge between darkness and light. The veil is thinning, the shadows awake. Earth starts to tremble, the mountains will all shake. Rise, rise, ancient flame. We carry the song that has no name. Through storm and starlight, we are reborn. The circle is unbroken, the veil is torn.
Welcome to an episode of We Don't Know What the Fuck We're Doing, also called The Shaman and the Philosopher. That's an inside joke, guys. Welcome. We are so happy to have our guest. It was sort of thrown together magically and fortuitously here at the last minute, hence the opening joke. Now, to formally introduce everybody and welcome you to this, I guess we should say special or to be special episode of The Shaman and the Philosopher. So we have with us here to my left, I don't know where he is for you guys at home, Vincent Barrows. And below that, we have Rick Osmon. These are 2 individuals that we were blessed to have on our show already as guests. Rick, happy to say I'm in studio for this episode, so I can pay much deeper attention to the rabbit holes as we meander. Each of these gentlemen are independent researchers in their own regard, much like myself and much like all of the guests that we have featured here on The Shaman and the Philosopher. I must admit that at this table, I do feel a bit like the cub, as we used to say on construction sites, meaning I have before me some extreme elder, or at least, Vince, I don't know if we're about the same age, at least experiential wise, I would still credit you much further along in this whole independent research thing than I am. So for that being said, guys, I'm just trying to get across how honored I am to be at the table with you two. Vince, you can back me up here on X so the audience understands I'm coming at this with you guys from the same perspective. On X, what was it, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago? I sent you a DM and I said, hey, do you know the work of Rick Osmond? I'm thinking about having you guys on the show together, right? So as I learned, there is indeed a backstory. We're going to kind of just open there. Welcome everybody to this episode and let you guys sort of introduce us to who you are separately and quickly, just so our audience catches up on kind of what you do. But then let's dive into you two and your little backstory that precedes me meeting you.
You want to start, Vince?
Right. Okay, sure. I met Rick when he was hosting the Oopa Loopa Cafe, that's Out of Place Artifact Cafe. And Rick had a weekly talk or radio show on a blog, and for every week he would come on and give us a talk about meeting different groups, and AAPS, the Ancient American Artifact Preservation Society. We talked a lot about copper and ancient mining in Upper Michigan, as well as the graves of the Golden Bear and I remember some of the shows were about Cahokia Mounds as well. And Rick interviewed me to talk about the Cahokia. That's where I first started volunteering on a weekend at Cahokia Mounds and learned about the site. And Rick asked me to come on and talk about that from my expertise at Cahokia, from being a tour guide and volunteer, and then just research everything I could find out about it. And
I did not know that. Vince, keep going. That's so cool, dude.
So I was able to meet Rick in the Ancient Artifact Preservation Society in Michigan, and went to several of the Copper Harbor shows and talks up there, and really appreciate Rick's expertise on ancient technology as well as copper mining, and the Burroughs Cave connection is amazing and interesting. And so yeah, I'm happy to be here to talk with Rick again and to share about it with y'all.
Now you canceled the show, Burroughs Cave. It's a forbidden word. Now we are.
No. See, I was writing a note, dude, because I had seen someone that, well, let's just say someone that's, posts on X and that's relatively well respected talking to Burroughs Cave. So I already had my note going there, man. What's so off limits about a cave?
Look, everything is possible. I just watched an interview with Finkel, one of the responsibles for the Middle East part of the British Museum.
Yeah.
And he said, with all these words, and it's a man that there is no one who dares to stand him because he has so many years of research that no one dares to say anything. He just said that there are hieroglyphs, Egyptian hieroglyphs on Göbekli Tepe. Okay, and no one said anything. So anything is possible, apparently.
So let's go back to the Oompa Loompa Cafe for just a moment, because
Let's do that, please.
Vince kind of, I would say he understated his role in that by a whole bunch. He became the producer.
Understate his role. That is not a characteristic we have come to know here on the Shaman and the Philosopher.
He is
humble pie is like in his breakfast. Go ahead, Rick.
His expertise not only as a researcher but also as I'll call it studio producer, but it wasn't completely push button. There was a little bit of intuition required because it wasn't a stable platform. Blog Talk Radio. Anyway, Vince pulled it off. There was one episode where I was at a conference in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And it was our show night, a Thursday night. And Vince was at his house producing online, of course. And I was driving around in Halifax with Gunnar Thompson in the passenger seat. And I was conducting an interview with Gunnar Thompson while driving around in a foreign country, having zero idea where I was, being completely lost, missed a hotel, missed a turnoff and everything. And so I just told Gunnar very surreptitiously, off. And he took over while I pulled in a parking lot, pulled out a map, figured out where I was, where I needed to be, and then picked back up on it. And we got to the hotel, and I told Vince we were going to cut off because I was going to get into the elevator, and I knew it was all metal. So he carried it till we could get back in touch. But that's how flexible that man is.
Okay, interview over. I've heard enough. Ricardo, I think we could move on to the next round. You meet our qualifications here at Independent Pirate Radio, known as Shaman and the Philosopher. That's a brilliant story. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's the Oompa Loompa days. We now have a concrete vision in our minds of the very Hunter Thompson sort of reminiscent type gonzo reporting we were doing there from the fringe of American history.
Gunnar Thompson, not Hunter Thompson.
Yeah,
Gunnar Thompson. Big
What's the difference?
Gunnar Thompson was a diffusionist author. Hunter Thompson was a crazy,
Okay.
drug-crazed reporter.
Yeah, I call him the scribe of God. You can kind of understand where I'm coming from. Look, here's what I like about his writing, and we'll keep moving now that we're loose. Here's what I like about Hunter S. Thompson's writing is that he wrote about the 1972 campaign trail, right? And in his style, he's describing these politicians as reptiles and lizards, you know. So after the campaign and all the books are written, they ask, I forget which candidate it was, you know, if it was a Democrat, whoever it was, right? They were asking him what they thought about Hunter's book, and he described it like this. He said it was the least factual and most accurate thing written about the entire event, right? So, so when I was in college and I ran through his books because in it I was seeing that he was portraying something, you know, very honest about the American or the cultural landscape that was not being readily portrayed, you know, sort of much like we're doing about American history. I felt that he kind of did for my young mind, right, about what was fucking going on in the world, at least as far as the American culture and stuff. Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm done defending one of my personal literature heroes as you just smashed him to pieces, Vince. It's your
But you can't-
judgment.
No, I'm not being judgmental. I'm saying there's a vast difference between him and Gunner.
Most
But
definitely.
anyway,
Most definitely.
Gunner proved, to my notion, that maize, we call corn, turkey, a whole bunch of other products, foodstuffs, staples included, were exported to the old world long before Columbus came along, and shows up in ancient Egyptian art, ancient
Yeah, they were.
Germanic art, even. So, yeah, I encourage anybody who gets a chance, look up some of these books. They're great.
And that's one of the interesting things I remember we talked about is the corn exporting to Egypt. And I mean, there's evidence of this. There's corn that has ties to America, and even corn vessels that stored the corn from America found in Egypt. And some of them were made out of gold. Actually, they manufactured these vessels out of gold, and they were made to show the corn from America and how they stored it. It was that important.
And some
Yeah,
of
I've
it
heard-
have
I've
been
heard
viable.
tales of some sort of Mesoamerican story events where and you may know the particulars. If we don't, let's move on. Where, right, some conquistador was searching for gold, right, and in translation, some of the natives thought, you know, they were like, oh yes, you know, this is what we call gold, and they were actually talking corn, right? That in translation between the two, you know, what he meant, how he defined gold was how they defined corn, and they both happened to be the same color. And so it showed me at least the value of the two, but also I thought it was funny if true.
I got to the same information from this individual. Let me see, that you can see on screen right now.
Hmm.
There is Carl L. John Hansen. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah. Yes. Dr.
So it's the
Johanna.
so which one did it first?
You mean which one did the research first?
Yeah, we see the presentations of corn. He has this book all about it.
Gunnar Thompson's research was primarily in the African and European Mideastern world, but he did acknowledge that there was a lot of Indian influence, South Asian influence, present in particularly Mesoamerica. So to say that one of them did it first, I don't know. They were both working on it at the same time. The difference,
think I have
the difference is that Carl's work was primarily on species of plants and
Corn and
animals,
nipples, corn and nipples.
parasites, and pineapples. Yes,
And
That-
giving us the finger.
well,
Fuck you.
So-
We found the corn. We're gonna be fine. No.
Yeah, Gunnar
The-
Gunnar
the-
concentrated on the Egyptian art in the temples and the tombs that showed foodstuffs and stuff
What'd you do
and
to
other
Vin?
materials that could not have come from the old world.
So it looks like temporarily lost Vince. I'm sure he'll find his way back here shortly. Yeah, so I don't have much while we wait to Vince to offer, from my own research, other than when I do look in the DeSoto Chroniclers, Rick, I do see they mention corn in a way, and they describe it in such a way that, to me, tells of very long established practices, such as the Three Sisters method that we're all familiar with, where they had the corn stalk with the beans and the squash, which each benefited from the different conditions allowed by putting the three together, and then nitrogen and so forth returned and taken by another, right? A symbiotic relationship. Now, that doesn't happen, in one lifetime.
An induced symbiotic relationship.
Right. And then they describe these fields that go on forever,
Yeah.
for forever, right? They walk through them for it sounds like if you're on a choose your own adventure with them forever at times, right? If it's either people or corn, for much of this adventure they describe. So at least from my own little research, I don't see why anybody has a problem with corn being here a long time, because the first Westerners described it in such a way that it had to be here for a while.
It's the other
right?
way around. It shouldn't be in India because it is appeared in the
Correct.
statues that
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
yeah, it shouldn't be in India because it is an
Right.
American
It's
thing,
a
right?
American product.
Clear.
However,
So it
Gunnar
appears
Thompson brought
in
to
the-
my attention that in ancient Rome and in ancient Greece, under a different name, the Romans ate polenta, which we call mush, but it's basically the same product made from corn plants.
Corn. Yeah. When did polenta start? Was it with Columbus?
Well, it's mentioned in ancient Roman texts, so you make your own judgment on that one.
There you go. Right? Either polenta changed course after Columbus's journey and became a completely different dish,
Right.
kind of like cornbread becoming donuts, but or they had fucking corn in Rome, right?
Well, and Gunnar found illustrations
With it-
in Germanic art and even in Celtic art of what they called basically Welsh hens, but they resemble turkeys to me. Right down to beard.
might be a little bit of sidetracking, but I will take the opportunity because I would like
You would never.
you to to explain to us what is the conflict with the Ogman script. So
Ogam
it's the
script.
fact that yes.
I don't have any conflict with Ogam. However,
No, you don't.
Spell that, Ricardo. If you're going to send us down a rabbit hole, I'm going to make a note. Spell it, please.
Ogman?
Ogakam.
Yes. Thank you.
And to call it a script might be a misnomer, and not a lie, just a misunderstanding of what it really represents. That's my opinion. This is just all my opinion.
Sure. That's why we're here to learn.
Studying for a while.
Are we going back to syllabary? Is that I remember last time?
No, actually, this one is alphabetic. But it is certainly related to what we discussed on the line of sight stuff. I'll give you for instance.
Okay, got it.
And a timeline to go with it. All right. Most of the so-called experts will tell you that Ogam came into use in the British Isles in about the 1st century BC and continued in use up to at least about the 5th century AD. However, it represents different languages because it represents an alphabet. So is it telling you in Welsh, in original Celtic, in Pict, in whatever language or dialect of whatever part of the island or island masses you're using for your Ogam? Now, that's representing a different
Spanish, English,
language.
same letters, roughly, and completely different language.
Right, but they're still all based off of Latin alphabet.
Right.
Okay, but it's a Latin alphabet represented in tree Ogam. And this has to go with the whole 5x5 matrix. Because if you look up the Ogam
from our
how it's
message
made,
sending.
yes, it's 5x5. So they're taking quick the shorthand notes of whatever's coming in on the line.
Right. So for our audience, the quick recap here is if you've got a 5x5 grid in front of you, right, and you're trying to communicate long distance with light, with whatever, with one sort of shot symbols, you can do that very efficiently. If you have a grid that's understood on both sides with lettering, you can very quickly send sentences and much more.
Right.
Is that good,
and
Rick?
Here, that's it. But in the Ogam, it might not necessarily be that they understand what they're seeing. Just trying to capture it for somebody else to interpret.
Mm-hmm.
So this would not be the Latin influenced peoples. This would be the spies and whatever. Kind of like Geronimo did to the U.S. Army.
Right.
Because they were using Morse code thinking that he couldn't possibly, none of his braves could possibly understand any of that.
So, but along the lines of the Ogam script and even the corn connection, the Wallam Olam, I guess, was another text document that was written, believed to be written by the bards or the people that would have brought Ogam script with them. Bardic would have been the group where the chief of the bards would have been the Olam. And they wrote this document on birch bark and on wood pallets called the Wallam Olam. And this has been traced back to 1820 in Indiana near the White River. And I think Rick might be able to shed some light on his view of it. But the Strawtown.
Anybody have any imagery?
Yeah, I have this document I could share my screen on here. The Wallam Olam. I'll share my screen.
Spell it.
So what it is, the Wallam Olam was originally written by,
spelled two different ways.
or recorded by Raffines, and Raffines was a French missionary, and he lived in the Strawtown, Indiana area. They were trying to determine where he got this from, and it was from someone he said by the name of Dr. Ward, Malthus Ward of Indiana, gave him this back in 1820 to 1822. And recently we found that this person was in fact Malthus Ward, and he recorded this in his journal from 1820. The names of the tenants were written, and some of them included the name for corn as the village of the corn people. And Raffines was there. He collected this document from Dr. Malthus Ward in 1820, and in the Wallam Olam, they called it the village of the corn or berry people. This was a Iroquois, Shawnee, or Lenape chief that lived there in Strawtown. And the French named their village.
Is that related to Poverty Point?
No, this is in Indiana, so it's
No.
it's around the time as Poverty Point, but it's actually kind of close to Rick's area of the country.
Yeah, the White River is here in Indiana, and it's actually the East Fork and the West Fork. If I recall correctly, Strawtown is primarily along the upper parts of the West Fork near what is now Anderson, Indiana, Falls Creek area.
Yeah,
Am I looking at the right thing?
yeah, that's it. That's the Wallam Olam first glyph. The Wallam Olam was written with these glyphs, and some of these are actual artifacts matching the glyphs on the Wallam Olam that are found throughout the country. And this is actually a map showing the city names. some of them depict this grid that Rick was talking about, and the corn images, and all of these were like totems or symbols of the villages across the country. And they included the corn, the berry people, and the corn people. And even it reached out to North Carolina, where they had these Kofitacheke site in North Carolina. They found these totems that were wrapped with pearls, and each one of them represented the tutelar saint sculpture, or their clan symbol. So it's interesting how it ties in with Rick's area of Indiana, being that was the Lenape stronghold, I guess, before the Indian Wars of 1810 to 1812.
Yeah. And on the old maps here, you'll find it listed as Delaware instead of Lenape, but it's those people.
So why is there so many? Maybe there aren't so many, but the few that are public are strongly against Ogman being, or any derivative being an ancient language, or an ancient text, or an ancient script.
Only in America.
I think
They're not against it being that in the old world, particularly Ireland, because, well, that's okay if it's over there.
right. They don't want people to learn that there was a connection to Native American culture from the old world to the new world. And I guess, but this is the clear evidence that there was a strong connection.
Got it. So we have evidence somewhere over in the Ireland part of UK that would potentially, or does, depending on which side you take, tie them to Native American. Got it.
On several different levels, in fact. But everybody who thinks they can prove that starts out with the voyages voyages, depending on how you interpret it, of St. Brendan, the navigator. And I don't predicate it on that, because St. Brendan was following somebody else's lead. And
Got it.
and when an archaeologist, who at the time I believe was a DS9 federal employee, archaeologist, Robert Pyle, was in Wyoming County, West Virginia, and found Ogham on a cliff face in a rock shelter, and brought in an Irish Ogham expert who said, yep, that's Irish Ogham. And both of them were just completely gutted, vilified in the press, in the archaeology department. And then a few years later, Robert found a skull and a rib bone in a nearby rock shelter, and had DNA and C14 run on it. And it was a 7th century Irish guy. So think of that what you will. And you won't find that in any of the archaeological journals. But he did it.
In the Americas.
In the Americas, in Wyoming County, West Virginia.
Of course she was.
So they don't want any connection to the old world before Columbus. That's so strange.
It's not strange.
No, it's not strange. It's not even strange that it was in West Virginia, one of the strangest of strangest places for strangeness to occur, which makes it make probably just that much more sense.
West Virginia.
And since
You know,
we are on,
there is still a space in West Virginia. I think it's about 8 acres, 80 acres. I forget the exact area, where you can't have anything that emits electromagnetic radiation. Not a cell phone.
Well, you're talking about the government, right? Radio quiet zones or whatever, right?
It is a quiet zone. Yes, it is. And it is listed as so on the USGS map.
but is
Couple that with having hills where you park your car on it, they roll uphill. You know, it's just
Well, there are two of those.
Weird place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Weird Indiana should be a whole series of books. But
Weird everywhere. Should be a series.
Since
But it's
we are
interesting that the Ogham connection, and how they would have inscribed these letters. Oftentimes, archaeologists point to microblade technology or microlithic blades, where they would use a small flint, burin, or spall to engrave these letters. And microblades and cores are evidence found throughout the country, throughout the North America, as well as Europe and Africa, all around the world, that date back to 3000 BC, even earlier, back to the early Archaic time frame. So to connect, the Ogham and all these ancient scripts with evidence of writing, they would have had to have the microblades to write that and to create the script on the wooden boards and on the birch bark scrolls and such. So, I mean, there's clear evidence of that found throughout the country.
so it's
Well, I mean, just logistically, Ricardo, it's not that hard to, as our previous discussions have already showed our listeners, to imagine a Northern European nation on its own accord, stumbling and bumbling and finding its way over here eventually,
yeah, and Vincent, you would say then that is a global thing more or less at the same time.
Right, absolutely. It was happening across the globe, throughout Europe and America. And I mean, a lot of the writing, Ogham and his early writing styles developed around the world around the same time.
We had Gunnar Thompson in India. So, yeah, we're spanning the globe here with connections.
What you going to say, Rick?
I was going to say that as far as the transatlantic first voyage, it was probably going from west to east because of the Gulf Stream. So it was probably North Americans going to Europe first. Whether by accident or not, that's where that water goes.
Well, the
Right.
Amok is almost a straight line from the Americas to Europe, but it's a very long south and then west and then north arc if you are exiting from Europe. So it's
Right. And visualizing wherever you're going with the capacity of the native navy, right? One only need envision at home a canoe, a couple of seaworthy canoes, right? Get out to sea far enough, hunting for whatever they're hunting for, and the Gulf Stream itself, a river, could then whisk them basically over into Northern Europe, where they then, eventually, after a harrowing fucking adventure, land in Ireland shaking and looking very fucking different than what's on the ground. And they all go, hey, we've got sails and big boats. Where are you from? And where's that shiny shit at? Right? And then they,
There's some truth in every bit of
retreat
it.
steps.
But back to St. Brendan. St. Brendan went from east to west against, or I should say, in the eddies of the Gulf Stream. He described going to Iceland. He described it pretty well, in fact. Flaming rocks falling from the sky. Other aspects that were very clearly, and he called it sea love, as did Pythias before him. But St. Brendan, with a bunch of his monks, came in a leather boat on a wooden frame. And surprisingly, the worms didn't eat that leather boat up before he got here, apparently. Pardon me. But I don't think all of the monks went back with him.
But
What year
being
was this?
monks, they didn't leave much of a DNA signature.
sure.
Sure.
Now, having said that, I'm going to segue into
Until they stole those native women, Rick. No. We all know how many DeSoto tried to kidnap and take home, so,
yeah, well, it did him a lot.
and the monk's vows packing, right?
So a different group of people apparently made the Cherokee because they have a different set of DNA, right, Vince?
Yes, the Cherokee DNA, I mean, there is interesting that they have some connections to the African, sub-Saharan African, and even Spain and Portuguese in the DNA.
Now, damn
As
it,
well as
Vince, the
XQA.
last time you mentioned Cherokee on this show, we spent 3 weeks in Arkansas.
Well, is it?
we,
Yeah,
we took fire from everybody. All right, now I'm fucking with you.
No, he didn't.
But it's
mention
true.
something. I did.
We made some friends out of the ordeal too, so it is truly all in jest. All right, let's go ahead. What rabbit hole are we heading down now with the Cherokee?
well, it's
Okay, well,
interesting.
the Cherokee actually do have quite a, I hesitate to say, an admixture that is unique, including X2A, which is a Middle Eastern origin.
Well, why the fuck do you hesitate, Rick? You said it, so tell me what the apprehension is now.
Well, because not everybody believes
Or I
it.
make my note, man.
But the DNA analysis seems to be pretty clear that, you know, I
Yeah.
don't want to say, I didn't want to say the word mongrel, okay? But their admixture is unique, and it's not all Native American. It's not Mongolian. It's not exactly the same as the Algonquin X2A, but it's pretty close. And it's got a bunch of
don't
other
really
stuff
know
in
how
it.
to define it, is what you're trying to say, is there's like
Right.
it-
There's no way to
okay.
actually
say what it is.
define an origin for them.
Got you. Now that's
They have an origin.
put it that way. That's
And then
yeah, of course
to come
they
up with-
had an origin.
but then to tie this into what Vince has been working with on the Pisgah stuff, what was that correspondence? How did that go? We weren't here then.
Yeah, it's interesting. They said the Cherokee were either always here since 15,000 BC, or they weren't here until after 1680 AD. So there's a pretty big discrepancy there.
There's a little gap, I would say. Yes. So
There is. I look at the end of the day, I like a mystery origin story, you know. Whatever. I also see a much longer span of history than your average, you know, mainstream sort of allows for, or what we would call, you know, Homo sapiens history upon this planet, right? I have a much longer sort of time frame I'm coming from, to be clear to all my friends who don't over there. But yeah, I like a mystery origin story because I see much more that can be looked into there, you know, to tell us about our history here.
and you touch the point, because the problem I think we all find when you try to go back, especially talking about America, is this absurdity that although there might be 300,000 years of Homo sapiens around, not to mention that Neanderthals were very good seafarers, and there's a few number of documents and papers that are peer-reviewed showing that, is that we only started to use boats in the last thousands of years. So that the sea was a unpassable barrier, that man would reach the coast and said, well, that's it.
Yeah.
And
Edge of the world.
Yeah, we've addressed this a bunch, right? Edge of the world, you're going to fall off it, when in fact the natural forces that were in place would have taken anybody in a boat, you know, over the course of just a few generations to one side or the other. You know, so much so, remember Sarah and Jacqueline, I think they told us in the last chat we were in talking about the copper issue. They said, we've renamed the copper conundrum to simply, they had boats, you know.
Yeah, and like
The thing-
Rick said,
It hits home this point, right? That we were, as you said, Rick, to start this little line, was that, you know, if you've got roughly 300 years of anatomically modern Homo sapien consciousness plodding around on a fucking planet, you know, you sorted out boats and you sorted out a whole lot more than that. And that's just not a hard ask, you know, for anybody to understand that.
they deny,
Well,
first of all, go on, Rick.
I made an off the cuff a priori today. There was a news story about finding walls off the coast of Brittany, new undersea city. I don't know if you guys caught it or not, but they have located a series of walls.
I did. I saw that. Yeah.
So I made a comment
how far
off
off it-
Gary that said, watch, at some point they'll use the new technology, which is in, I'll say, advanced development, of making the equivalent of a sonic boom to trigger a seismic event under ice so they can find out what's under the ice. Because radar won't penetrate water, frozen or otherwise. So my a priori is that they'll do that over Greenland, and in the channel between the two big islands, they will find an undersea city there. Because it would have been above water 12,000 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah, once you're walking around with that 400 feet, is that correct? Sea level, rise at the end of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 years ago. Then yeah, you're walking around with understanding that there's a whole lot of land that would have been above water.
And here
Right.
I must interject this. People keep referring to the 400 feet of ocean sea level. And they keep forgetting that there are two forces here, is isostasy and eustasy. So when they say that the sea rose 400 feet, we have to assume that the bottom of the crust of the earth also subsided a fair amount of feet. So it's just when the water rises, the bottom of the ocean goes down. So when you put ice on top of America, is still rising after 12,000 years. It's
like the ice sheets have been pressing down. You got
it's still rising. America is still rising. So yeah, and that's why, and here I just have to plug in, that's why the Azores area is so important, because there are 3 continental plates in there. It's one of the most plastic areas of the planet. So when you dump all of that water into it, we now see there's people talking about pyramids that are 1,000 feet down the water, 3,000 feet down the water. That could have been on the surface because
of the compression from all the melted ice.
It's just not the water rising,
Got it.
is the difference between not having weight on top of the crust and having weight on top of the crust. So there's a huge difference. The area that was above water is much larger than just putting the water out, taking those 400 feet out. There was more land out of the water.
Well, another thing I commented on today was, I believe that was on Facebook. It was a promo for Flint Dibble, which I had to laugh at all by itself.
A friend of the show,
And
a friend of the show, I'm sure.
And I commented about his debate.
The more you say the name, the more it grows. That's my new joke. Flint Dibble's like Flint Dibble's like a dick. The more attention you give it, the more it grows. So
I'm not going to give him that kind of.
you've already sent us down this road, Rick. So now
Okay, I'm going to finish my
erected
what my
functions
comment was.
are on you.
My comment
sir.
was when he said to Graham Hancock that, look, nobody has ever. Oh, thanks. Hang on just a minute.
Rick, we lost you. I don't know if you can hear us, but I think Flint Dibble just managed to
Right?
somehow
How is he in
canceled you.
stream? Vince, it's you, isn't it?
No, I don't hear Rick anymore either. But I was gonna say,
No, I was making a joke. I said you're the spy that shut him off right as he was talking about our buddy Flint.
but I was gonna say to Rick's point about the
Go ahead, he'll be back.
to Rick's point about the ocean travel. I mean, this was something that was thought to be impossible for so many years. And even though Thor Heyerdahl proved that he could travel across the ocean with a sailboat, he did this, and that was so
With a reed sailboat.
Right, with the reed sailboat, and this was all using nothing but the technology the ancient people would have had. He had to prove the scholars wrong by doing this, and all the people that the academics said he'll never do it, it's not possible. Well, he did it, and I mean, it's still so ingrained in their, I guess, culture that they don't want to admit that it's possible, even though he proved that it is possible. So, I mean, it's something that needs to be just.
Yeah,
And let's not forget the Phoenicia that did
Right.
not only around
Yeah.
Africa as it did from the Mediterranean to the Americas with a 600 BC boat.
So I understand, right? All of this, I understand all the lore. I think anybody that's looked into all these the transoceanic, as you'd say, instead of any one particular processes, right? Or lore in the culture, right? You get it. Here's where I'm hooked, and I get it, is once I know how long Homo sapiens roughly have been present somewhere, walking around with this brain that I have, right? And once I see natural processes such as in the Atlantic, I've got the Gulf Stream, right? That if I toss something off in the Gulf Stream and it gets swept away, it will eventually, if it's, managing itself basically, get to the other side. And that works on the bottom, as well. We all know hurricanes that live here in the southeast come across the bottom of the Gulf Stream, right? So naturally, anybody in a boat would get swept up, quite naturally, whether they lived or not. They'd make it to the other side eventually through natural forces, okay?
Right.
So for me, I get that. I understand that. And I don't see why we need to argue that, hey, sure, that's likely.
Yeah, it's just so ingrained in I guess the archaeology and the way they thought for
Right.
so long that they couldn't have made it. But they did. I mean, Thor Heyerdahl proved that it was possible to get across the ocean. They still, though, won't admit there's any direct Atlantic connection. And any of the languages like Ogham and, anything from Europe that would connect the bards or, Bardic people to America. It seems like they push it off into fringe land, so they don't want to acknowledge it.
It's strange, isn't it? This sort of just this transoceanic question, this strange battle, right, that rages over any evidence, right?
Right.
That's why I tried to describe, Rick, welcome back. I was saying that I just at the basic natural understanding of if I throw a bottle in that ocean, it'll get over there if it gets caught in the stream, right?
Yeah.
Same thing would happen over 100,000 years, probably repeatedly. And, some point the human's going to survive that shit and going to get across, right? So if I can understand that, why can't I at least look at everything and all this evidence like you're pointing out, be it on either side of any ocean and go, well, yeah, that indicates that they probably did.
Well, it's a matter of what chronicles they accept and what chronicles they don't accept. But I'm very curious to hear Rick, because we didn't hear.
It's like saying giants, though, is what I don't understand.
Exactly.
Keep going. It's like saying giants or saying Atlantis. People just go on either side, but it's like, what the fuck do you mean? Have you ever lived by water? Did you ever spend 3 years by water and restrict yourself to whatever you could make? Okay, pretty soon you're going to get across that fucking water.
Well, but that's another point I make about archaeologists will stand and argue with you to the death that ancient people couldn't navigate on the water.
But why?
It's like, you can't navigate on the water,
Right.
nobody else could. That's what you're telling me. Because
And again, not trying to make fun of folks. I'm trying to get
that
to
is
the mystery, right? Like if I can just picture human beings in any environment, dude,
Yeah.
give me 3,000 years, I don't need forever. They're gonna sort out the basics of that environment to an excellent degree.
Jason,
right?
if they didn't find
Right. And they're going to use the tools that are needed
Right.
to give themselves an advantage, whether it's a trade advantage, a survival advantage, whatever it is, to know where they are, where they need to be, and how to get there. Whether it's on land or sea is kind of immaterial if you're doing celestial navigation.
I'm pretty
Which they
sure
were.
if there were no signs but chronicles of the huge dolmens and the huge menhirs and all of that, they would say that's a fantasy. That's a production of mythology transformed into oral culture. They don't exist. They are forced to say exist because they're there. They can look at them, right?
Yeah.
So, but the ships aren't. the ships
Stanley
are.
Kubrick did it for a movie.
That's how they get away with it.
It's narrative blindness, I guess. Look, if I just look at all the things we're talking about objectively and I disregard all narrative, again, what do I see? Yeah, plausible, more than plausible, probably likely. And the more little pieces of evidence and ogums and olums and ogans and all this shit that gets thrown up, the more, why am I not more likely to go, yeah, see, told you it was fucking possible. I lived by a lake for a while,
Yeah.
right? It's just
Rick, I still want to
narrative blindness.
hear about Flint Dibble and Graham Hancock.
Of course you do. Of course you do, Mr. fucking controversy.
Okay. If it doesn't cut me off again. During the debate on Joe Rogan's show, Flint Dibble said, look, there's never been any ancient ships of 12,000 years old found on the continental shelf, and let it drop, and nobody questioned him. It's like, well, of course not, asshole. That was an ocean then.
Right.
But nobody questioned him. And that's my big issue.
Yeah, just the environmental changes that, occurred all over the earth, not just on top of the water. And as you were describing, when you have this event, if you're accepting any of the younger Dryas data, right, Dryas, and you're not, whether you're talking impacts or you're talking solar, you're talking whatever, you do have these pulses, meltwater pulse, 1A and 1B, right? Yeah, okay, that happens. That without a doubt happens, right? So these forces, Ricardo, like you were describing earlier, that water rushes in, right? It's moving the environment underwater and causing all sorts of cataclysmic type events to occur even there as it's all unfolding.
Yeah, because the ice doesn't melt all at the same time. The borders remain frozen, so it's a huge basin of water that is stopped by a thinner and thinner layer of ice. So when that ice breaks
them.
It's all hell breaks loose because it's an unimaginable amount of water coming down through the land, right?
Right.
So, and the problem that you are describing, sure,
very noticeable on the scablands.
And the problem here,
I don't know.
While catastrophism is not a well assumed and respected way of interpreting the past, which uniformitarian and materialistic science doesn't like very much, because if we can't see it, we can't measure it. So they measure everything by what they see, and that's what they have been done in the last 200 years. So if the two continental plates separating America and America and Europe and Africa moves at a few centimeters a year, they calculate the centimeters and say how long they were put together. So that's how they come to the millions of years. The problem is they can move much faster from time to time, right? So,
yeah, here's where I think I am with catastrophism is, look, when you look at it as a philosophy, right, or whatever we want to say, a train of thought that is implied to the whole, right, you can basically trace this down to a couple of individuals or just a couple of warring ideologies, right, that then gets you down to a couple of individuals, right? So if I just shut that shit out the window, right, and then I start looking at the channel Scabland, as you mentioned, right, where Randall Carlson, has so vividly been showing us what's been going on there forever, right? And we start to understand that these events, the Younger Dryas, right, this shit has happened, right? So if I'm just there, why is catastrophism, if I'm not worrying about these two warring dudes who had ideologies and shit about what was going on here and what everybody thought, then I just realize, okay, the physical evidence is here. So yeah, shit happens real fast sometimes, real bad, out of space. Oh, what the fuck was that? Boom, oh, it's gone, in a second.
yeah,
Like Rick said, I mean, they needed to,
Yeah. 3-eye atlas.
like Rick said, they needed to have the tools to navigate. So, I mean, they needed something that would tell them what where they were going, what time of day it was, and they used tools like sundial and a this is an example here on the screen. I'm showing one that
Yeah, I'm looking.
that this is actually from Ohio, and it's a mold for a sundial, and they would have used this to tell what time of day it was. And it also, it looks like it had been fabricated to be able to make molds of the sundial and reuse it over and over again. So they
would have used this.
they would dangle a plummet or a plumb bob and dangle it from this side, and then it would look at the angle of the sun and the shadow of the sun, and to be able to tell what time of day it was, and then use it for a navigation tool.
That's very similar.
They hang that and then look at the shadow. Is that
Right.
understanding you?
Yeah, they look at the shadow of the.
Yeah, but a couple of notes about this rock here. This rock that he's showing. This thing weighs about 300 pounds. But the hypothesis.
I'm here going, well, what do I do
William
with it?
Smith said that they would take sheet copper. They would take sheet copper and use this as a mold to make this device. To hammer sheet copper into this shape.
Right,
Then
so
they
it's like
have
a
a
mold
big
for a
tiny pendulum that when they hang it, they get a clock shadow.
It's like a sundial.
Do we have any examples?
But you know, at night you don't need a sundial.
Do we have any examples of what was made with this stone?
I don't know of any. However, we have let's see, what would I call it? Disassembled, discombobulated, dismembered pieces of copper sheeting found in mounds
I see.
that might fit in that mold. I have never had the chance to find out if it fits in that
That's
mold.
a wild device either way.
The pieces of
That's so
copper are described by, yeah. But they also had wood hinges. They could tell what time it was. They didn't need it much except
Wood
down in there.
hinges. So we're talking the holes in the ground, circular stuff like that.
Yeah, but they would be a specific, a circular, not a full palisade, but a circle of spaced holes, so that it would act like a Stonehenge for equinoxes, solstices, other cross
That's a good way
border
for
days,
the audience at
etc.
home. Yeah.
So that when the shadow fell on that, you knew what.
And William Smith discovered this.
Yeah. And they were found. They've been found pretty much all over North America, from Miami Beach to northern Minnesota.
William Smith also.
Go ahead,
So it
Vince.
was a very
William
common
Smith also discovered the angle of that sundial was 26.5 degrees, and he said, comparing it to the pyramid, the main hall of the pyramid was the same angle. The holy angle for the Egyptians was the same angle. The Newark Holy Stone was the same angle. Yeah.
Now look at you, Vince, just dragging us over into the diffusion camp again. That's really cool. So 26.5 was the angle of the.
No, it dragged us all
Was
into
the inside angle of the pyramid, or you said it was one of the angles of the pyramid?
The main.
No, it's the angle of the grand gallery within the Great Pyramid. And it's important because it is also the optimum angle to use what we call Archimedes screw to move water up a hill. But Archimedes called it the Egyptian screw. So take that for what it is.
So anybody that's got visual could probably show this Archimedes principle. It's actually pretty cool. And you can take a look at the hydro properties of shit when used in a certain way, and what that could have meant for past civilizations.
But the optimum angle for the screw is dependent completely upon the acceleration due to gravity at the surface of the planet. Who knew, and how did they know it?
Well, they have an advanced aerospatial program back in the time, so.
That or they were very lucky. Extremely good observer.
If you take any good observer and you give him enough time of observing, and a couple of people that'll stick around after he leaves and keep on observing, you can get some pretty wondrous observations rolling, you know?
Well, it's a matter of ingenuity, and that's our problem, because today we are all
Agreed.
focused in things that are written in paper. And if you go, for instance, when Archimedes had to determine how much metal non-gold was on the crown, it was lucky that he picked it up when he was on the tub.
Yeah.
Because the water came out, and Eureka! He realized he could determine the mass of an object by the movement of water. So
I like what you say there, you know, about the obsession with things that are on paper. I often express it like this, and gentlemen, I say this as somebody who went through higher education, right? I have the experience. But I often say that I often, well,
Endured
you know,
it.
look, luckily, man, I went to this local, you know, by the time I was finishing, I went to a little local university, and they were testing out something that year called a liberal arts degree, meaning I didn't have to pick a traditional major, you know, until damn near the end, right? So that allowed me to do what I wanted to do, which was jump over here to Latin, jump over here to anthropology, and, you know, just try to collate, you know, a whole bunch of stuff. But before I lose my point, you know, I often say that what we call higher education, this is a quote from someone else, right, is often expensive isolation from reality, right? Because that is to say that once I did dive into reality and start going out into reality and pulling every single thing you see behind me, right, from reality out there, you know, where I could find it, I started to learn that there was really a lot to that, right? And then as you start engaging with these people, as we all have now online, right? And I don't mean these people in a negative way, just these people we're speaking on, right? That are hinged to these books. That's what you always get, you know, hit with is we'll go to the library, do some real research, you know? And it's like, you know, what's this with the paper in front of your eyes? So it's just to expound, Ricardo.
sure.
And one of the
And by the way, go on, Vincent.
one of the tools also that William Smith had told me about was the astrolabe. And I mean, he was a very good researcher about the use of the astrolabe and all the different types of astrolabes. He believed that these were used commonly to navigate across the oceans. And I mean, the angle of the sundial is one thing, but they also could have used it for an astrolabe to be able to determine the angle and look at the position of the stars and determine their latitude and longitude. I mean, they had knowledge of travel that extensive.
Well, they can do the latitude. Yeah, it'll do the latitude, but you
That
have to
was the
use
problem,
a different method
according
to get longitude.
Academics, yeah.
Right. But
As
it
the
wasn't
same angle.
possible by any stretch of the imagination.
Sorry,
Right?
experimenting. It has the same angle. Keep going, Rick.
The- so to determine longitude by celestial navigation, you need to have an almanac that tells you where the moon will be in a specific angle to certain stars. Okay. And you have to have a prime meridian that you're using for your navigation system. Today we use
Greenwich. Yes.
England, Greenwich. But at one time it was Cairo, at another time it was someplace else. But whatever society was doing their maritime navigation, their city probably was their prime meridian. And you would use what they called the method of lunar distances or lunar diameters to check the distance of the moon, whatever phase you could see the moon, from whatever specific star was in your thing. And you would have a chain that each link was inside of it was the diameter of the moon that held at arm's length. So you could just go boom, boom, and then count the number of links. You had your angle, didn't have to do any calculation for that. Go to your almanac, and it would tell you basically just go ahead and tell you.
But what
your
more knowledge did I need? I need to know what moon cycle I'm
So
in,
it's like a 30-second.
and I need to have the fixed point.
No,
Okay.
no, regardless of moon cycle. But that if you can see the moon, you can use this method.
And And
If
that
the darker
requires
the
an
moon, the only
almanac,
time
or
you can
doesn't
use it.
need one?
It doesn't. It does require some almanac, and you have to have 2 or 3 fairly bright stars that you can see for your season. That part depends. So your almanac goes for a year because your sky changes over the year. You can tell your time of day, although you don't really need to exactly with this system. It's helpful, but you can tell your time of day if you're in the northern hemisphere by looking at the swan and which way it's looking, because it runs on a
So
24-hour
what do you
clock.
think about, and Vincent, what do you think about the Antikythera mechanism?
Oh, that's amazing. The technology they had to make that
That's weird.
at the time. I mean, that's it's so advanced and it's incredible.
I know
that
you're looking for an image, right, Ricardo? We can do it. Antikythera device, right?
I have it. I have it here.
Great. Okay.
The single most important finding that I've ever found or ever read, ever researched about this device is the engineer who's worked on it for what now, 21 years, said, this is not a one of a kind.
It's not one of the kinds. That's what he's saying.
Well, yeah, it's not a one-off. You know, whatever this was, there had to have been more of. And there was probably a learning process.
Right. It was probably a standard issue device for navigation for whatever society was using it.
Just a second. I'm almost there.
Yeah, some people call it a potentially a lost artifact of a much older, you know, you could go the pre-cataclysmic route. But most certainly an out of place artifact. I think when most people say, when you really look at it, it was knowledge, you know, or possibly represented knowledge that they would have had at the time, meaning, you know, about the stars, but you don't see anywhere any sign that they'd have known how to build this damn thing.
Oh, good.
So this is,
Okay,
Well, yes and no.
straighten me out.
I was just going to say that
Go ahead, Ricardo.
I think this has the internal of the structure.
Yeah,
There's a good shot.
it's just an absolutely wild device when you look at other artifacts, you know, known of the time.
Yeah, but when you look at the time frame, this is the time that Hipparchus, a Greek astronomer, was making a star map of, I think it was 1,114 objects visible to the naked eye. And his star map was accurate within 3 seconds of arc. I want you to think about that for just a minute. They didn't have the instrument, supposedly, to make that kind of a measurement.
So how do you explain it?
So,
Extremely accurate.
well, the only practical explanation I could have would be he had a telescope that he could use as a camera, what they call a camera, an auto camera, basically project the image onto whatever piece of paper or whatever he was using, which was then translated to stone. But they didn't have that kind of technology either. So I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I think that they wouldn't get to this kind of device without a long history of former devices. So and the fact that and metallurgy.
And metallurgy.
I mean, it is the equivalent, I mean, nearly of finding a very fine-tuned handmade watch, right?
No,
And-
it's
and-
more like a
And
computer.
assuming
It's more.
that
Oh,
there
yeah.
were no watches preceding it, figuring out how to do that, right? I mean, it's just, it doesn't make sense.
I think
There has to be.
I
They
think
have
to
have
call
the
it.
technology.
Right. They had to build up to that damn thing.
I think to call it just a watch
Right, but you also had contemporary tales of automatons, of bronze owls that could fly, and all kinds of automatons, puppets that moved
Well,
on their own.
and that's not hard to believe if I
Usually
just
made of
look
brass
at
or
what
bronze.
they were doing in France, whatever, 150, 200, 300 years ago, you see such intricate things that even today, if I showed a kid today, they'd go, "How in the world did you do that?" It's a simple little lost art over generations, but yeah, I mean, just
Right. How many people today could
no.
make a Chinese puzzle, let alone open it?
Right. It's like they had.
Yeah, those.
Yeah, without a pry bar.
No, I think,
So to get back to,
no, please go, Rick.
go ahead. To get back to how all this tied together for me and Vince and a few other people on this Ohio mystery stone. He called it, what he called it
Ohio Rock.
for the, uh, anyway, yeah, the old something Ohio Rock. Anyway, um, another piece to the puzzle, another navigation device that he tried to solve, and I think he did a great job on this one, by the way, was something called the Koba dial. And the Koba dial comes from an illustration on a Mayan engraved stone panel, limestone, of a warrior slash priestly person, maybe standing on the prow of a boat on the sea with dead bodies floating in the ocean and pyramids cracked and falling on their sides and volcanoes erupting and all hell breaking loose. Don't know what that event was, but it must have been pretty bad. Anyway, hanging off the belt of this individual on the prow of this boat is what is called the Koba dial. And you might be able to find an illustration for it. You might not. I don't know. But the panel itself was lost during the bombing of Dresden in World War II. It may have survived. It may not. We don't know. But this Bill William Mark work on this device was impressive, and I think he nailed it, to be honest.
I am always curious about bombing targets, as soon as, especially from that period. Those cities, man, over there in Europe, what was lost?
Well, we could also talk
Again,
about Sherman
yeah.
going through Georgia.
Yeah, brought his psychotic murdering ass.
Not
down here.
military
Yeah.
target.
Yeah.
Courthouses, grain mills, not sugar mills though. Didn't attack the sugar mills because they could make whiskey from that shit. And that was taxed by the U.S. government.
Yeah. Good times on planet Earth.
I would like Jason to show. Well, you could send me the photographs while I do another question for both our guests.
So
Send me 2 or 3 pictures. I would like to show the metal deposit on the stone to Rick, and
in the circular
yeah, and some of your most interesting artifacts, so we can just show Rick and Vincent. Send me the links and I'll share the photos.
Yeah, okay. Do you want me to? I mean, I can just share the screen.
You can?
You want me to do
Oh,
that?
you are in the computer.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah. Sure, man.
I will do that. I just want to say.
Go ahead.
I just
Yeah,
want
go
to
ahead.
say that we just launched another paper. This time we're looking into another piece of evidence showing that the conservative 100,000 tons of copper that we find in the archaeological record of the old world could not have been produced by the mines. And this time we're not looking at the mines, we're looking at paleoecological signs of deforestation, charcoal, and chemical signs left by what would have been a massacre of forests in order to produce all of this metal. So if just a shout out to people to go to the Institute page on Academia Edu, and you'll find the paper there. Rick, I think you read it. Do you have any notes to me in terms of the consumption of wood per kilogram of copper, considering the chalcopyrite, the sulfuric, and the metallic copper, on the differences?
No, the only thing that, and you touched on it, but it might need a little more at some point, perhaps need a little more treatment, is the different types of wood that would have been used to make charcoal, because the conifers just don't do it very well. It's the hardwoods that make good charcoal, but that's also the most sought wood for other
Sure,
purposes.
I didn't remember to touch that. But do you think it invalidates my point, or you will enforce it?
No, not at all. It makes it a little more intricate, but the pollen studies would show that in an even more great detail.
Okay, I have to look in that and see what I can find.
I
Thank you.
think.
And I have to send the paper to Vincent. I haven't done it yet. But I just published it today. After Rick gave me his approval. He even responded to me in Portuguese.
Okay. All right,
Well, I
I'm gonna
haven't
try a
seen it.
screen share.
Okay.
See what I pull up. I pulled up two different things or ways we can try this. Let's see what happens. Okay, first of all, let me maximize you. Right, okay. Share. Screen or presentation? Let's share screen.
It's
I'm gonna try entire screen, yeah?
yeah, or window if you have it on an open window.
I'm gonna try entire screen. And it's not. Let's see. Okay, it's not liking that, so I'm just going to pop between windows here. Two ways we can do this. Let's share this. Okay. So quickly, Ricardo, if you just want a picture of the circular metal deposit, we can. Are you seeing my YouTube page? What have you got, dude? Can you?
Yeah, we see your page. We see your page.
Okay, cool. So this is the one you're talking about right here in the middle.
Because
Right.
my question here is, if that was from 12,000 years ago, I think that the metal would have corroded almost entirely. So it has to be from a catastrophe that is closer. So at least half of that date. But I would like to hear opinion of Rick and Vincent regarding that.
So here, Ricardo, just to give him perspective. So here, I'm down the hill, and you'll see the second one I point out here in this rock, right? Now, this is an independent rock from the one we'll show here quickly. I should be able to buzz through this, Ricardo. So you've got this. Now, guys, this is metal. And if you look at this rock, look, that right there, okay, these little white pieces of quartz, it's like looking at fucking modern day concrete, right? And every rock you see in this video is made up of that, okay? And then this in here, if you can see my pointer, it's metal, right? It's rust, it's metal, okay? So I'll continue. And I'm gonna pull out from this one, right? And just, I want you to have perspective, right? And in here, I'm gonna walk you up the hill to this next one. I'll point out to you that all of these rocks piled up, you know, whatever you want to call them rubble, call them whatever. They're square pieces. They're all shapes. They're the size of SUVs, and they're piled on top of each other. And some sort of force had to put them there. Now, the one Ricardo was wanting you to see in total is right here on this large piece of stone.
Have you ever seen anything like that?
Yeah. So, and then that's the picture that I started with here to just get you a freeze frame, and y'all go ahead. Yeah.
I looked at that, and it's interesting. It sure looks like a face on that one in particular, but it's so rounded. Like I don't know.
Yeah. So the thing that drives me, bonkers about it is if I can get there and freeze, what really bonkers me about it, man, and what first caught my eye, boom, 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 right, is okay, so here between these two, okay, I have not only a circle, and when you're looking at it head on, Logan was trying to get me more in the picture than this fucking thing. But when you're looking at it head on, right, you've got this concentric circle. Now, these two pieces, dude, again, this is metallic mixed in with, look at this quartz pebble heavy matrix of stone. All right, I've got these two. Now, on the other side, I've got the same finished circle and it has the same distance between it, right? So I can see here where it melted again. So I have multiple, and then it carries on out, repeating concentric circles around what, when you're there, looks like potentially a central bore hole. If you've done construction, you might even see like a core drill bit. Now, the real conundrum, and see all of this right here, guys, this is rust. This is little flakes of metal and shit right in there. And then all of this continues. Now, there's another one of these, a little more melted on the backside of this same rock. Now, the conundrum to me is however you want to explain this. First of all, if you look at all of the videos on this page, this is 3 years of this entire landscape, guys. Rick, you've been to Mentone, right? You know this place. All of the rocks up there exhibit all of these qualities, this metal in these strange configurations. So yeah, that's the mystery about this particular one, is not only do you have this one, guys, you've got a third, and then you have one down the hill in a separate piece of stone. There you go, Ricardo. There's the mystery of the circular deposits.
So my question stands. Do you think the mineral, the metal, the iron would last that long from the Younger Dryas, or can we relate it to a more recent event? You are muted, Rick. That's why we can't hear you.
Thank you. Sorry. I would say that the iron can be oxidized. It can also be sulfated, or calcimated. It can be combined with any number of different elements and still be red. But it can also be durable. I don't know what that is that's that red. There are other elements
We can also show examples, Ricardo, if we were just depending on time, but I'll at least describe, right? I can share examples of it not only exhibiting red and melted, of exhibiting sort of in two separate sheets that are brown, not even, much more like this, like, because the elements are constantly, I guess, exposed and people are passing by these rocks, right? So they almost take on the shiny sort of quality. But you find it in little brackets. Just it exhibits itself in every stone once you start taking your eyes to it. You let this big one catch your eye, and you go, "What the fuck's this? Why is there another one?" And then you go to Little River Canyon, you go to DeSoto State Park, you go everywhere on Lookout Mountain, and you just look at a rock long enough, and you're gonna find, what the fuck's that? That's a metal bracket, melted into this weird ass stone.
Well, I'll give you a couple of other examples in that area. If you're on the trail that goes to Welsh Cave, you will find two separate sand dikes. You know what I'm talking about with a sand dike?
Explain to us.
Okay. Seismic activity squeezes real hard on sand to the point that it liquefies it, and it shoots up through a crack in the rock, and it rehardens and becomes a harder substance that's surrounding substrate. And it will show up as a ridge above exposed rock. There are two of those noticeable on the bluff out by Welsh Cave, overlooking Little River Canyon. So yes, the geology there does some really strange things.
Looking into it, even the geologists, keep going, Rick, but even the geologists for the audience, it's a mystery to everyone. There are solid accepted stories, but even those are kind of like, they're like, it's just a weird place, no matter which source you go to.
Yeah. But Vince, did you trip over that one sand dike one time?
Yes, I remember that.
So Vince, you know the area too as well. That's really awesome. Then I hope we definitely get the chance to meet back up there here in real life one day. Yeah, it's just once you see this and those rocks everywhere you go, you know, and I went on and on for years documenting, you know, when you drive along Little River Canyon, I started calling them roadside rocks. You know, you see the weird melted mushroom rock, just pull over, walk over the canyon rim, and you're going, what the fuck is this? Here's a lion's paw, you know, right here, right? Here's a scaled, you know, Ricardo pointed out, that looks like a giant snake, you know, with all this metal melted. High heat, high energy event, you know.
Well, Ricardo described for him the snake he saw in Wisconsin.
He's on mute.
You're muted.
Ricardo's on mute.
Because you're munching.
Did you
No,
hear me,
you want
Ricardo?
me to, I'm gonna have to go get something.
Oh,
Mute.
Ricardo's on mute.
I'm sorry, I clicked the button twice and it didn't work. I'm sorry. I was saying
You're back.
that since
Getting the Marx Brothers in here.
since,
Harpo.
since then, I watched another from the work that I'm doing, and it's exactly the same thing. So it's a pile of stones created for a long distance that ends in coils. So the one that I saw had two coils, one at each end, and then it continues to extend to the other side. We walked, and we believe that it's more than a mile long, so we couldn't find its end. But they are both done by a natural spring, so that creates a pond. So that's something that I also have in similar. And we saw I don't know if you went with me to the smaller one that was closer to the place where we are staying. Did you? Yeah, that one was
The water.
no, I didn't know.
are sort of-
smaller one.
No,
But
that's the other thing, guys, is you probably already know about that area is, and folks don't believe you when you say it, they gotta go fucking look it up, is that little river, we're talking about this canyon in north east Alabama. They call it locally the only river in the world that runs its entire course along the top of the mountain. And while, yes, it's only 98% of it, but it pretty much does, right? It generates itself on top of this mountain and then runs its course until it falls right off and joins another river, you know. It's just very odd all the way around, and all of this odd stuff is
Yeah.
around. And then once you start exploring, get down to the bottom of the little river, whether you're in DeSoto on the East Fork or whatever, you start walking along, and all you're finding are these little primary springs that are bubbling out, right? And you go, well, let me wander up in here and watch for fucking bears. But when I wander up in here, what do I see? I see blocks, you know, I see, again, strange metal hooks like caved into each other. And I get up in there and I go, well, there's fresh water coming from out of there. Now let me look up. Where did this shit come from? Huh. You know, there's no cliffs above, it's just big piles of stone over these little tributaries that are at the headwaters. It's a curious place, magical place, honestly.
well, the other thing you'll find somewhere near the falls, in particular, is a
What?
turtle-shaped rock.
See, that
turtle-shaped
I'm certain
rock.
I've seen a couple that
People-
I believed were turtles down in the West Fork, so not far from the falls, you know, but right where the State Park Lodge is, when you can climb down
right.
from there. There's yes, I've seen yeah, there fucking is.
Yeah.
I've got video in here. You got to watch a lot of video to see this shit, but that's what a lot of these are, guys, is you know the area now.
But-
It's just me walking through
but
there.
Rick, I'm saying that they are natural or man-made.
I think that they've been modified a little bit, just to make it a little more obvious. But the original shape, the natural shape,
Okay, I
lends
see.
itself
Yeah,
to being.
there's definitely that
But-
takes place. There's a lot of guys I found, especially I'm thinking of the roadside rocks there in DeSoto. No, first one's in Little River. When you get up in there, there's all these swirl patterns that Vince, I'm sure you guys are familiar with. You know, natives have swirl patterns and sometimes
Yeah.
3 of them. You can find that stuff all over the place up there.
Right. And turkey tracks. There's a couple of turkey tracks along that run too.
Oh, yeah.
Or
I mean,
big-
it's just, it's amazing where they would take especially there in those rocks, the metal, okay? So when you've got a big strip of metal, if you look at some of these roadside rock videos, then the staining from it, right, kind of starts to make patterns. You can see where then they would go in there and start working and even accentuating with that stuff. Yeah. Power from I say
Yeah.
both before Cataclysm and then most certainly the native presence was huge up there.
Well, my concern in these places is always to look, is the bedrock the same kind of mineralogy than the blocks that are on top of the bedrock? Is it the same stone or isn't?
No.
And in your case, it doesn't seem to be, because the
Right.
the one on top looks to be almost conglomerate, like
Like a conglomerate.
like something
Concrete.
was meshed together, the quartz and but the way the quartz is,
Right. And that goes back to the seismic activity that made the sandite. So back to Wells Cave, and Vince can back me up on this one. There's a crack in the bluff that keeps the caves dry. All the water runs down through the crack before it gets to the actual edge of the bluff.
we see that in ancient caves that were worked by.
And as far as we could tell, that crack is bottomless.
I said we see that
I'm sorry, I
done
couldn't hear you.
in many caves in India. I've seen that in India. I've seen that in UK.
The cave systems all over North Alabama and Central.
They have a
Very deep.
place to the water to get out and does not flood it.
Right. But this one appears to be a natural crack, but someone at some point recognized the value of it and made this, what would you call it, a cyst in the rock that is bone dry, powder dry, and just the right size to desiccate a human body.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. I remember we
Been
talked
there.
about that. And so the possible connection there with DeSoto, maybe that's where they took him or some of his people.
No,
Oh,
King Arthur II.
Yeah, I got to address a puppy, but I'll be right back. I just got a
But
puppy
you
right over here.
saw that.
Keep going. I do want to hear about this DeSoto connection.
So
King Arthur II.
Okay, well, it's a DeSoto State Park, but we were there with Lee to look at it as possible initial resting place of
Oh, right.
King Arthur II.
Lee Parrington.
Pennington. Yes.
Yes. This is still going back to the Oopa Loopa Cafe days because Vince was my co-host / I think I was producing that night, but we had Lee on as a guest and he was talking to us about Welsh Caves and lamenting the fact that he didn't think he could get into it because it was on a cliffside and somebody told him he couldn't do it. And we said,
Yeah.
yeah,
We
we'll
did.
make that happen. So we made that happen.
So how was the experience? What did you find inside?
It was interesting.
Well, this desiccation cyst, as I call it, we thought that there might be some shadow play on the walls of the cave, but we weren't there at exactly the right time of year, and we never did get back at exactly the right time of year with the right weather. But some later research I did kind of validated some of the eyewitness reports we had that previous, like by 1960s, about all of the stone that had been on top of the bluff defending this little part of it had been removed and used as doorsteps and foundation stones. But there had been stone walls on top of the bluff whenever or ever. And I got to doing some satellite image research and found that the soil compaction reflected exactly that. And you could follow the lines of where the walls had been. And it had been a substantial construction.
Yeah. And I remember we looked at the
But there's no hard evidence of that now.
geology was
Hard
amazing
soil.
there as well, with the giant ravines and waterfall. Yes.
and Springs, as Jason mentioned.
And
Yeah, I thought that was a
it,
great site to visit.
and in this no in this case, have you found anything that is like dimples in the stone or any kind of imprintings in the stone, or was just that desiccation tank that you speak of?
No, there was quite a bit of graffiti going back to Civil War days and since, and I think a couple earlier. But there was one engraving over the entrance of, I believe that was the second cave, that resembled a great deal what I call the sigla of Arthur the Second, and it's a stylized Kumara A symbol without a crossbar, and then a Y intersecting the A, and it's in the rock over that entrance. Lee took a good picture of it, and it's on the cover of my book.
And so that would be from what time?
Sixth
So
century
that alone would signify that there were
AD.
European traces left on the Americas on the 6th century. Is that it?
Well, yeah, but getting an academic to accept that is beyond difficult.
And that Arthur is an historical figure, or is like the legend of King Arthur that is not recognized?
The legend of King Arthur would have Arthur living like 243 years. The Chronicles of Wales would have two different Kings Arthur living in that period of 243 years. Arthur the First and Arthur the Second.
Well, that makes more sense, doesn't it?
And
It's still a long time, but
archaeological evidence. Well, yeah, but it's like great grandson Arthur the Second. I own a table that was built by my great grandfather. I didn't know him, but it was still his stuff, and his, not even the same last name, but I carry some of the genes. Anyway, Arthur the First almost certainly was born and lived the first 3 or 4 years of his life at a place called Tintagel or Tintagel on the west coast of Wales / Cornwall. And in an archaeological dig in that place in 1964, they came up with this slate where a child had been practicing making letters or whatnot on this slate. And his name was Arturius. And he had this same exact sigla on this slate that was found over that cave in Alabama. So,
really,
you take that for whatever.
Well, but I think that's not even contemplated by academics, so they don't actually reject it; they just ignore it, right? That's what I think happens. So.
No, it's just oh no, it's just something we don't care.
I think the mysteries in North Alabama currently on every level, once looked into, detonate every narrative. I really do. There's so much up there, and then that carries on into Appalachia as a whole. I think in general.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We were discussing West Virginia, and I'd have to agree. So everything along the Appalachian Trail is weird.
It is, it's just known for anomalies, whether you go to local folklore, whether it's human anomalies, whether it's weird shit in the sky, whether it's ghosts that do strange things, whether it's cryptids, it all runs rampant in this area. Yeah. let alone all.
Well, and not just that area. That's because the Appalachian Trail runs from way south
Yeah,
of where
correct.
you are all the way up into Maine.
Well,
So
as they say, the natives, when I first started looking into marker
and
trees, Rick,
Hmm.
because I was, finding them around here. So when I first started doing my research there, I came across many people that said, without a doubt, that you could have navigated from here, roughly the Gulf Coast, all the way to Maine, using simply marker trees,
And
at one point in time.
and stones on the ground too.
Yeah, all sorts of once you get out there chasing these environmental indicators, right? Then yes, you start to pick up on how many there would have been available to them, not just these trees that were what a market tree is for the audience is manipulated, over years into a certain shape. It's a known quantity, they indicate various different things. Water this way, food that way, trail this way.
Monument, mounds.
Right.
Joe's grave over there.
Although marker trees are also not globally accepted by academics. So, and
Well, I mean, my basic research
Not
into it
generally
showed that it's
accepted.
a known quantity. I mean, take that for whatever you want. And then when I start going out in the wild, that's where I started was observation and reality with all these damn trees that I knew did not grow that fucking way. And when I decided to use them as an indicator, where did I find myself? Well, look, there's a lot of native activity around here, and there's also fresh water, and there's springs coming up from the ground. Why is that white bark tree everywhere? Let me go see. That thing's huge. What does that mean? There's always fresh water. They planted one of these, so you could always find fresh water, right? You start going out there and you start realizing that all of this was so, and then you go do a little research, right? And you find out, yes, of course, it was so. But it began right here, Ricardo, me looking at this giant white bark tree out here. You
Well,
go, man, that's fucking big. That looks like, the Amazon. You get down there and you're like, man, that thing's like you can't even put your arm around it, right? You
what?
just don't see that around here. And you look up and it's like, 90 feet straight up. And you look down and you go, oh, look, there's caves under it because there's water flowing, That's if I lived in this environment, of course, I put that there on purpose, right?
Sycamore.
And then you just test it and you start go looking. Yeah. Anyhow, so they use them both as geo markers, but also they manipulated them. As I found it, the Mobile Burial Mountains, I call it, one that is an X, or looks kind of like a man. But in various different ways. Yeah. Go ahead, Rick.
And they'll use different species to mark different things. They'll typically they'll typically use the longest living trees, an oak, and usually not a white oak, something else, fir or black. And they'll manipulate that to mark graves because that's something that's not going to change. Water sources are actually pretty self-explanatory because they'll have sycamores and willows, maybe water birch. But those trees will always be near water because they can't be anywhere else. Cottonwoods usually the same way. Cottonwoods don't make good marker trees because if you change the way they grow, they die.
that might be important.
Sassafras, which, you've seen the curly Q screw-shaped walking sticks made out of sassafras. They'll do marker trees out of that, but the screw shape will be the size of a barrel. That means somebody's out there every day manipulating this tree until it's in that shape. And that one, I haven't figured out what it marks, but I've seen 3 different examples of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's always marking something, and that's what I'll wrap with this. And we have to look for a wrap here pretty soon, guys. I think, Ricardo,
Yeah,
just because we need to hop on another show. But yeah, it's once you just get out in the environment, all of these things we've listed out, you start to see. And if you allow yourself the time to experiment, right? And you start going, okay, there's a manipulated tree. Let me look around. Let me see why it might have been. Oh, look, there's a large rock. That's out of place. That's kind of big. I couldn't pick that up. Let me go over there. Do I see something else? Let me look over that way. Oh, look, there's another manipulated tree. And you do that. Right. And then you see for yourself that, again, I always point out to people, it's why when we say they had boats, if you just go spend time in nature and these environments that have been inhabited by these natives, you see this stuff, you see it for yourself.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
It really is.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's there. The best
That's right,
friends
sir.
there.
They do not. Reality is the only place to learn, Then we come back and sure, if I need to reference some past knowledge, but until I take a look at the thing primary, right, which is the way I try to say, doing away with all objective and let me just see what the fuck's in front of me, right? When I do that, I'm engaging directly with the material, the source material,
Yeah, but
forming my own.
these are matters that depend almost exclusively on experience and first observation. Because there are things that
That's
are
true.
not good in photographs, they are not easily explained in books. And for that alone, they are avoided by people that do write about history, right?
Sure.
And then it's still a mystery because we know that these trees are being replaced because the market trees die and someone has to place another one. And there's several places where there are mysteriously being replanted and reshaped in order to point in the same direction. Who is doing this? We know it's the natives, but we don't see them doing it. So they have their ways in order to conceal all of this kind of movements. Not that, for instance, the places that I visit that are of significance to them are remote and there is not a lot of people around, so they can manipulate the tree without being seen. But there are places that are just by the road, or so it's a mystery. It's a very interesting. I wasn't aware of market trees until I've finally. I only fully understand them when I finally saw one and then another and then another, and and and, and they are.
So if I could
Go
jump
on.
in, I was going to say there are some interesting marker trees over in Illinois at south of uh, Belleville and south of Cahokia Mounds. The marker trees pointed towards a known archaeological site and pointed towards a waterfall. So these trees were all over from Pennsylvania to Illinois, and I do think that they were purposefully modified like that, and just allowed to grow. There was a lot of studies done on those trees that had shown that the natives pointed them in directions that they intended to point in direction to point out something important. So, I mean, market trees. I guess the alternate viewpoint is that they were naturally broken or something, and that they happened to just grow strangely like that. But
Yeah, what people will call pareidolia in rocks, whatever in nature, seeing something. Listen, let me back up my resume here. I used to run a bonsai garden for a while.
Oh,
Bonsai nursery. We grew Japanese maples. We grew stuff for bonsai, but we also trained bonsai. Big, real, actual deal. I did that for years. I loved bonsai. Now, a huge part of bonsai and what I dug about it, but that is very true, is you have to sit and just stare at trees for a while. You've got to go out in nature and you got to be able to look at a tree and go, all right, why is that little gin, as we call it in bonsai, that white piece, sticking out on your pine? How did that get there? Oh, I see a branch fell, right? You have to go and do that. You got to sit and study a tree. And now I love nature. You see all my driftwood and shit. I try to bring it all in with me. So I would do that, Vince, so I do have that experience. Now, when I got back outdoors, chasing all of this that's behind me, right, in these past 6 years, I'm doing the same thing. I'm out there just walking in a deciduous forest, right, mostly well away from, any real water source that I know of, right? And I'm just walking and I see the trees and the way the trees form. And I see there's one that's kind of bit, kind of funky, but oh no, look, I can see where lightning struck right there. Yeah, sure, right? But then you see one that's just, and you go, all right, nope, nope. Somebody trained that. There's no dead branches. There's no knobs, right? There's nothing that shows me nature did it. And you go, well, fuck, let's follow it.
There's no
And then you do, and you
Look,
find more.
in
You go,
in
okay.
Indonesia, and we hope I think we have to close with this. In Indonesia, there are still people that train the vines to create bridges. So those bridges
Hmm.
go from generation to generation, and people take care of the tree. In this case, they're taking care of the vines or the roots of the tree, and the tree is the bridge. It's completely natural, and they cannot cross to the other side because of the monsoons. Creates what is a creek transforms into a raging uh, amount of water they cannot pass through, and they train these vines and these roots of these trees to create the bridges themselves, and they are there for hundreds, who knows, uh, years that they're there, and they create new still. So it is perfectly possible. It's not something that is not been done by native people. It's something that it apparently has been done for a long, long time. So I would suggest, go ahead, Rick, please. Of course.
Just one brief thing. Humans aren't the only primate that leave a trail. Chimpanzees will put pointers on the trail to tell the other members where to go.
And they use tools too. So
Yeah, yeah. I, I honestly, I love watching,
Yeah.
ape documentaries,
So-
when they're done decently, just trying to watch the
so
video.
if
Because you're right, you see all you see all the proto,
We do that down on
it's
Earth
just
Street.
so cool.
if you are an entity that is requiring some kind of helpers, and you look into nature, who you think is going to look more promising to mix with their own essence. So of course, they looked for the most advanced creatures that they were about, Australopithecus. All of that kind of early hominids would be the most advanced creatures on the planet in terms of functionality. They even could walk more or less upright from time to time, although they still climb to trees, but they would be the obvious choice. So
Yeah, but we made it. Look, I don't even,
oh, they did too, exactly.
Or maybe they did.
that's what I was, look, these days, guys, gosh, when you just even try to look at the evidence, tying us to apes, I mean, you it requires an open mind. I know where you're going, Ricardo, with
Oh,
genetic
okay,
manipulation,
another
but even
example.
if you don't go that far, the traditional narrative of us and sort of how we became Homo sapiens sapiens depends on a couple little pieces that aren't even really whole pieces in most places.
They are not evolution, I grant you that. Evolution is wrong, in my perspective. Exactly.
Evolution is
Yeah,
incomplete.
that's one way to put it.
But let me put it this way. If I were God and I was going to make the best possible thing, I would make it self-correcting. Now, having said that, not even primates are the only thing that leave a trail for its other members. Crows and ravens will leave pointers for where they're going.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ants
it's
leave a
visible.
chemical trail. Bees have a dance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a social thing. It's not so much an evolution thing as it is depending upon the other members of your species and
That's the
helping
thing.
the other members of your
Leave a
species.
fucking map,
to succeed.
please, human.
Yeah, well, my point, Jason, is there is not one single evidence of macroevolution. That's what's wrong with evolution. There is microevolution, but there is not one evidence of macroevolution. And in order to jump from Australopithecus until you reach or erectors, there are many more. There are many in the middle.
Denisovans and Florenzians, and
Every
all the
single
little
of those,
fucking offshoots.
every single of those kinds of what I call species are not the same thing. They are gigantic leaps in morphological state. So there isn't macroevolution. So that's why they don't find the missing link. How long have you been hearing about the missing link? I remember it 40 years ago, right? So
Well, we've skipped the missing link, Ricardo, and we started looking right at Mars lately in a few shows. And once you start looking at Mars, going, it's a fucking megalith, you're already,
So creationism, whatever the answer is, God, superior being, whatever it is, creationism to me is still, although far-fetched as it might seem, it's still the best explanation.
Yeah, I mean, creator, that's
Sure.
You call it intelligent
It's the same
design,
thing,
it
exactly.
has essentially the same
I
meaning.
mean, that's how we all manage to be on the same page, right? Even though I'm over here, pretty front and center with my experience with a creator, right? As a Christian might denotate. But no matter what you do to the timeline, right? In fact, the more you realize the size of this three-dimensional universe we're all fucking in and what could really be going on, especially with all the dimensions that are up and below us, right? Then you just start to realize that all of these things fit just fine. And you start to, instead of seeing threats in new information, you start to see the possibility of a much grander history than we have forto been allowed as human beings. At the end of the day, that's what I see in all this shit we talk about, right? Is each one of these things tells me something more joyous and powerful and expansive and creative about the human experience on this planet or in this universe than the popular narrative. Right. So if I get faulted by our mainstream friends for no other reason,
Well,
fault me for being an optimist and I like to now chase, a much grander story arc than we've been allowed thus far.
Go ahead, Rick.
well, having said all that, and
Yes.
knowing that we got to close out,
Ricardo's
real
good.
soon,
Look, because we've got another show puffing on. I see you.
the idea that we can
Jacqueline, leave us alone. We're working.
2 minutes. Can I get 2 minutes? First of all, I want to say that we work on mysteries without any clues. I know that's a
Still,
old song, but one of the things that Ricardo's been working on there wasn't enough copper produced in the old world to show up what's in the archaeological record. I'm going to give him a new one and see if he can challenge him, because it is challenge that changes
Indeed.
human beings, not evolution.
agreed.
The white limestone that lined the Great Pyramid that's mostly gone, they claim came from 500 miles south of there. The hole doesn't look big enough for me to have provided that much stone. Where did they get it then?
Well, they say that the stone came all from the Macatan formation. Goes from the Giza Plateau to the highest.
Well, the core stone did. The reddish brown stuff did. But the I think they call it Tefu.
I have
White
to look
stone
into
is
that.
from 500 miles
Do you
away.
think the quarry is too stone for that?
And so is the rose granite. There are 3 different stones. The rose granite's a different bed. But my point is, I don't believe that the quarry site for that white polished stone was nearly big enough to have covered the entire pyramid.
So,
I got the note, boss.
That almost-
Side
that-
track
you
there.
think
Pick up next
it's
time.
the geopolymer? Is that it?
No, I think they quarried some of the lining stone somewhere else.
Even further away, he's saying. But that's the rabbit hole we're going to go down.
Okay.
Next time.
Well, something to look for.
No, I said he's leaving us an excellent cliffhanger.
Vincent, any final notes?
Vince?
Yeah, I guess final thoughts. Just really quick. Thank you, Rick, Ricardo, and Jason for having me on. Rick at Oompa Loompa Cafe was great, and it really drove mystery and a lot of research, covering tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of examples of artifacts from ancient history. It really is a really great contribution to research, and exciting updates about Mount Pishka relics are coming up still on this Friday. We'll hopefully hear back from the Smithsonian, and they'll let us view these either via webinar or go on site and actually view them at the Smithsonian Museum. So I'm hoping to share that with you all as well.
Nice.
Yeah, that will be great.
Awesome.
That will be great.
It will be. Yeah, that's exciting.
Rick, where can people find you? I know your books are out of print, unfortunately. We have to change that. Okay. And on X as Rick Osmond. Yeah. We'll put the links down there. And some of the episodes of the of your former podcast is still available, so people can look for them too, and we'll find a bunch. Yeah. Yeah, so they are elsewhere. Jason, final recommendations for us?
Recommendations. Find me on YouTube. Yeah, find me on X. Ricardo and I have to hop off because we're going over to see the girls at Universe Unveiled with a premiere tonight. That was an excellent presentation by Sarah. Gentlemen, I'm really just excited by what we've got going here. I thank you both very much for bearing with us while we got all this rolling. And now I just very much looking forward to this being a more regular thing. Not only does it stimulate me, I know we have so much more to discuss. Just the four of us, and having all of this experience here is just a joy for me. So really, I just want to thank you all. And anybody else out there that is an independent researcher, communicator, artist, or on any side of any bit of history, you're just interested in the actual truth of our past, find us at the Institute of Natural Philosophy because, hey, we want to talk to you like we're talking to these dudes. Ricardo?
Absolutely. So I thank you all. Rick, thank you very much. Vincent, it was on very short notice. Thank you for staying with us. As Jason said, let's try and make this more regular because although we are all over the place, we can actually dive into one or two subjects and explore it much, much more vastly. But we'll get better in time. And keep in mind,
Yeah.
this is being posted in our new channel on YouTube. There is a Shaman and a Philosopher, no longer in the Institute page. So don't forget to like and subscribe. It means a lot and helps the channel. So thank you very much, and to all, a very fond farewell.
Thank you, guys. See you soon.